I get it standing in front of the TV with the remote in one hand and a stack of streaming apps in the other. You're wondering if a new soundbar will actually make movie night feel different or if you'll just be paying extra for a fancier box. You've probably already watched a couple of unboxing videos, read a few spec sheets, and maybe even asked a friend who's already upgraded. The big question is whether the Sennheiser AMBEO Soundbar Plus lives up to the hype of immersive 3D surround without turning your living room into a bass-shaking bunker. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the category itself is a bit of a minefield. There are cheap bar-plus-sub combos that sound okay for sitcom dialogue but fall flat on action scenes, and there are high-end rigs that promise theater-level immersion but need a perfectly sized room and a lot of tweaking. The AMBEO tries to sit right in the middle. It packs Sennheiser's virtualization tech into a single sleek unit with built-in dual subwoofers, and it claims a virtual 7.1.4 setup without actually needing extra speakers. That's a bold promise, because most of the time the virtual surround effect depends heavily on the size and shape of the room, the placement of the TV, and how the TV's own audio processing is handled. So, who should consider this soundbar? If you're the kind of person who watches a lot of narrative-driven films, think Christopher Nolan blockbusters, sci-fi epics, or any movie where you want to feel the environment envelop you, then the 3D sound field could be a game changer. It also shines for music lovers who stream high-resolution tracks. The AMBEO's customizable sound lets you lean into a wider soundstage that makes vocals sit in front of you while instruments swirl around. On the flip side, if your typical viewing habit is more about quick YouTube clips, news, or sitcoms, you might not notice the difference enough to justify the price tag. And if you live in a small studio apartment with a TV under a window, the built-in subwoofers could get a little too enthusiastic, shaking picture frames and rattling the floor. Let's talk about the real-world strengths. The first thing I noticed, after hooking it up to a 4K TV via HDMI ARC, was the clarity of dialogue. In a crowded scene from Dune, the whispers between characters were distinct, and you didn't have to keep turning the volume up just to catch a line. That's largely thanks to Sennheiser's focus on separating mid-range frequencies, which is crucial for dialogue-heavy content. The built-in dual subwoofers also do a decent job of delivering low-end impact without overwhelming the rest of the mix. I tried a few action sequences, car chases, explosions, and the bass felt solid yet controlled, thanks to the night mode, which lets you dial down the low frequencies when you're watching late at night and don't want to disturb the neighbor. Another practical plus is the streaming connectivity. The AMBEO supports a variety of codecs, so when you stream from a service that offers Dolby Atmos or lossless audio, the bar can decode and reproduce those tracks without needing an external receiver. I paired it with a Spotify Connect app and the sound stayed consistent across both movies and music, which means you don't have to switch inputs or fiddle with audio settings every time you change what you're listening to. The remote is straightforward, just a few buttons for volume, mode selection, and a dedicated custom button that drops you into a simple on-screen menu where you can tweak the virtualization depth, bass level, and whether you want the cinema or music preset. There's no endless scrolling through menus. The learning curve is gentle enough that even a tech-averse friend could figure it out in a minute. Now for the weaknesses that matter after the purchase. The first one is the size of the unit relative to typical TV stands. At over 2 feet wide, it sits flush with many modern TV frames, but if you have a narrower stand or a wall-mounted TV, you'll need to think about clearance for the subwoofer vents. The second issue is the virtual 7.1.4 claim. In a perfectly rectangular room with reflective surfaces, the effect can feel impressive, but in a room with uneven furniture or heavy carpet, the surround illusion can become a little muddy. I noticed that in my own bedroom, where a bookshelf sits right behind the TV, the rear surround cues weren't as precise as they were in the living room. That's not a flaw in the hardware, just a reminder that the technology works best when you have a relatively open space and can position the TV a few inches away from the wall. Another point worth mentioning is the lack of a true separate subwoofer you can place elsewhere. The dual subwoofers are locked into the bar's chassis, which simplifies setup but limits you from moving them to a corner or a more optimal bass-friendly spot. If you're a bass-hungry home theater enthusiast, you might eventually feel constrained by that design. Finally, while the